Yeah. And we also store so much in our bodies in general. And there's also that whole alignment piece, like you were talking about with the nerves and how they're connecting everywhere. And if we are not working on our nervous system, then we will eventually get to dis-ease in the body. So it's such an important part of our healing, and it can look so many different ways. And so this sounds like another incredible tool that people can look into.
Hello, thank you for tuning into the Natural Health Rising podcast. My name is Rachel Smith. I am a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I've helped hundreds of people naturally reverse symptoms of autoimmune diseases and other health challenges, from digestive issues to hormone imbalances. And in these weekly episodes, you're going to learn from myself and top health experts from around the world about functional medicine and holistic health tips to help you rise to your healthiest, happiest self.
On today's episode, I have Swirl Jordan Moore Williams with me. And Swirl is a lifestyle transformation artist and holistic guide specializing in holistic pain management. Her journey began when spinal issues threatened her quality of life, leading her to discover transformative healing modalities. Now she empowers clients to embody vitality and fulfillment through her deep knowledge and personal experience. Swirl's mission is to guide others on their path to vibrant living, offering practical tools and holistic wisdom for lasting transformation. Welcome to the show, Swirl.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for having me here. And hi, everybody.
Can you share more about your personal journey with the spinal issues and how that led you to discover holistic pain management?
Yeah, so when I was a teenager, I was diagnosed. Well, let me, I guess, go back a little bit. So when I was 15 years old, I was in a really dark place and I became suicidal. And I had 2 different suicide attempts that luckily were attempts. They did not work. However, coming out of that, 2 different things happened. One that was really great initially, which was I was forced to be alive. And so I was like, I must be alive for a reason. That's what the doctor told me, that anyone else would be dead. You must have some special purpose on this planet. And so I said, okay, maybe I should figure out what that is and start to live it. Simultaneously, there was like a slow degeneration that started happening for my body because of the attempts, mixed with the other emotional, spiritual, and physical aspects of what came along with having those suicide attempts. And within a year from that, I was in debilitating back pain where I couldn't get up out of bed some days. When I could get up, some days I couldn't stand all the way up. Some days I couldn't be touched. I couldn't be hugged, which was very challenging. And through seeing a bunch of different doctors, doing a bunch of different tests, I ended up with a diagnosis that was a whole slew of things, from degenerative disc disease, the onset of osteoarthritis in my low back and my hips, fibromyalgia, and 2 scoliosis curves, kyphosis. Multiple issues were going on. And that doctor told me that I would be in a wheelchair by the time I was 30. And I didn't really want to believe that. I was, a pretty rebel spirit and was like 16 years old at the time. And I was like, what? I just, I had just kind of decided that I did want to do this thing and keep going with life. And now you're telling me that the quality of that life is going to go just down and down and down. And I just refuse to believe that, luckily. Because quite often when people get a diagnosis, they just believe it and own it as their truth. And so I'm really grateful that I do have that rebel spirit and was like, no, like that doesn't have to be me just because this guy said that it is. So that's really the beginning of what led me to navigating how to relieve my pain, how to move from the space that I was in and like not lose my ability to be as mobile, to dance and to walk and move my body. I didn't want to be constricted to a wheelchair if I could help it.
Wow. So those are some pretty serious things like degenerative disc disease, osteoarthritis, fibromyalgia. You know, from people that I see in my practice, a lot of those can come from many different things: mineral imbalances, nutrient deficiencies. I see Lyme disease and mold, for example, triggering fibromyalgia in a lot of people. So was there something that you wound up finding that was really triggering that more? Or what were the next steps for you where you started to figure out like what was really going on and how you started to take action there?
Yeah. So what I found over the years, immediately, I started noticing that there was different areas of my life or my lifestyle that when I monitored them and could keep them in balance or in a balanced place, then I would have less pain. So one of those, as you mentioned, is nourishment. So I began to change my diet to really be aware. I mean, just even taking out drinking soda, because at the time, like I loved that. I was a kid, you know? And so taking that out, just that made a huge difference. And at the time, I didn't even know about organic food. I was raised conventionally. I'd never even heard about it. So I did begin a journey of what was going on in my like inner biome and how that was affecting, especially the fibromyalgia, which was increasing, which would, I guess, depending on where that was, would increase or decrease the amount of back pain that I was in. So nourishment was one aspect. And then I began to notice hydration and started to get into clean water and not drinking tap water because it has all kinds of different things in it that are not beneficial for our body, and learning about water, not just about the water itself, but the mineralization of the water, the structure of the water, the source of the water, and then the amount and how I'm getting it in my body. And I learned that chronic dehydration causes so much inflammation and so many issues. And so if I just have good, clean, mineralized, structured water, small sips many times over and over, then I felt a lot better. Really simple things. Then I got into tempering my rest and my movement. So how much was I resting? What was the quality of my rest? I found that if I rested on a regular schedule, then I had less pain. So I had to start to tune into my natural rhythms of my natural, like my circadian rhythms, my movement rhythm. When do I feel like I'm energized and I'm ready to take action on something? Then really following that and getting up and doing it versus, oh, I'm really feeling like I need to rest right now, and let me honor that. So because also, being a teenager, I was like, I just wanted to sleep all the time and or stay up all night. There was a wide spectrum as I became an adult. So that really became a thing. And then also how I was moving my body, the quality of the movements and what type of movements I was doing became a really important key. And specifically focusing on my back and on my spine and stretching my whole body was really important. Keeping my joints loose was really important. So I love stretching, I love dancing, I love walking. But I did end up finding a movement series that is called EDGU, and it's Evolutionary Spinal Maintenance. And so it's a system like nothing else that I had ever found before, and no other movement practice relieved the pain in the way that this practice did just the first time I ever did it. And so I really became focused on that one. And I was teaching yoga and different things at the time, and was like, wow, this is significantly different. And so I kind of took that on and started really learning how to teach it, learning how to share it. And now my husband and I are actually the lineage holders for that movement practice and that modality called EDGU. And then there's technically 3 other areas that I began to look at to make sure we're in balance, which was breath, how I was breathing, the quality of my breath, consciously breathing, understanding that the breath is the respiratory system is the only system that's going to happen on its own unconsciously, but we can also bring consciousness to it, and we can consciously breathe energy into our body beyond just the air that we're breathing, and that can liberate quite a bit of pain and inflammation and other things that have been locked at a cellular level in the body. And then sound, looking at sound and how it's affecting my body, from my self-talk to the way that I'm expressing or not expressing, is what I actually had found at the time, that I wasn't sharing my truth. I wasn't standing in my power and then expressing my authenticity. And the more that I kept that locked down and inside of me, was the more that constriction I felt in my body. And so I started learning about sound and making sound and following that, and getting into the quality of the sounds that I was making and sharing to share my authentic voice. And then that I created into a spiral to just follow that around, circling around with a little wheel almost. And then in the center, I found presence. And the more present that I am, then the happier, more fulfilled, better that I feel. And so it's kind of like everything, it always comes back to presence. And following all of those things is really what led me to my work and everything that I share now with my students and clients.
Wow, there's so many good nuggets in there I want to talk about. So let's get into some of those. I've never heard of evolutionary spinal maintenance. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how someone would get started with it, and also who it's good for?
Mm-hmm. So it's actually good for anybody with a spine. So that's pretty much everybody. And I say that because it's a maintenance system. And we have found that the spine that we are as old as our spine. So the quality of the tissue, the strength, the discs that we have is going to determine how we are feeling, how vibrant, how youthful, how alive we're feeling. And so this system it's created as it's a movement meditation series of movements that all of the movement is geared, directed towards the spine. So throughout these series of movements, each vertebrae is getting toggled and moved in all directions so that it makes the cerebral spinal fluid start moving and gets everything really lubricated and flexible. Malaligned vertebrae will come back in just naturally on their own, because we start to get that pliability in there and the strength to hold it, the core. So it's called EDGU, which is EDGU. It's not an acronym. It stands for the edge of you, which is your spine. It's the middle of your body where the two halves of your body come together. Even the two halves of your brain come together to the corpus callosum, and that ties down into the spinal cord, which goes through the spine. So it's all connected. And this, not only is it beneficial for the spine, but it's also beneficial for the brain, for the whole neurological system, because it allows the hemispheres of the brain to communicate with one another. And when that's happening, the brain actually gets powered up into a whole brain function, which when that is happening, you're in more of a parasympathetic state, and the body can follow into balance as well through doing these movements. So it's really beneficial overall for resiliency and for strength and flexibility. Then the fun part is that it's told through a story. The movements are all set up to specific parts of a story. So the whole time that you're doing this practice, you're going through this imaginative story that is life-affirming and self-reflective. So now you're getting into more aspects of emotional, mental, even spiritual aspects of your life, and looking at different things. For example, like maybe something that, like, there's a part where you're unloading a boat. So we love to think of that as like, well, what maybe have you been carrying around that's no longer serving you? Maybe you just want to toss that out of your boat. And then you want to reload your boat. So what is it that you do want? What are the resources or different things that you want to call into your life? And then there's a moment in the practice where you get to just name that in your own mind for yourself and what that is. So it's a really multidimensional practice, and the whole time just really focused on the center line and on really being present with your body, with your spine, all while doing exercise that's specifically for your spine. So it's really a fun and unique practice that kind of covers a lot of bases. And I think the other question was, how do you get started? So we, as I said, are the lineage holders for this. And so we have created a course that someone can learn this practice to make it their own. We've broken it down in little bite-sized pieces. So it's a self-paced course. And that way, because we found that when we start moving our spine in this way, a lot of things can come up, because we've never, it's like a ringing out almost of the spine, and all of the nerves go to different organs and different places in the body. So many things can begin to happen once we start to maintain our spinal health. And so we've created a course that someone can just take it and learn this practice. They learn the sequence and they learn the story, how to do every move. And so then they make it their own. And then they can do it as often or as long as they would like to, whether they do it for, 15 minutes or, a lot of reps and do it for, 45 to an hour, then it becomes their own thing. The only thing they need is their space around them, flat ground, and space to reach their arms out wide and to know the story, and then they can do it.
That sounds awesome. How long would it take for somebody to see benefit in their life?
It depends on the person, but usually almost immediately. We have multiple people who have done little intro things with us, that maybe they've just learned a few of the movements that we like to share with people. And just doing that for a few minutes a day, like that's something I'll give my clients. I'll give them one specific move and have them do it for 2 minutes a day, and then have them come back and tell me what's going on with that. And they start to notice differences like right away. I mean, one of our stories, this gentleman did like a little free class that we were offering, and we did just a short section, maybe 4 different moves, maybe 5. And he took that and he did it with us, but then he watched it again and again and was doing the practice. And he said within a week, he did it because he was having back spasms and he had never experienced that before. And so he was like, well, maybe this will help. So he started doing it. He said within a few days that they stopped completely. And he, not only that he was sleeping better than he had in years. And so he's like, I need to learn how to do this. And then he signed up and is doing great.
That's incredible. Yeah. And we also store so much in our bodies in general. And there's also that whole alignment piece, like you were talking about with the nerves and how they're connecting everywhere. And if we are not working on our nervous system, then we will eventually get to dis-ease in the body. So it's such an important part of our healing, and it can look so many different ways. And so this sounds like another incredible tool that people can look into. And we'll put a link to that course for sure in the show notes so that people can check that out. Did you say multi-dimensional or higher dimension? You mentioned a phrase that caught my attention in there. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, what does it mean what are higher dimensions and what's going on there?
Mm-hmm. So I said it's a multi-dimensional practice. And what I mean by that is that you were accessing multiple dimensions of our body. And so even higher dimensions, what I mean by that is that we are in a 3-dimensional world most of the time. Some people's consciousness has expanded into 4 or 5D, or even more. But what I mean is that on the 3D, we've got this dense body, right? This is our physical body. But our body is also made of different other bodies that are more subtle. And as they go out, so then we have a layer of a mental body around us. And some people might notice, like a way to think about the mental body, which is think about it, is when we're thinking a lot or noticing that there's like racing thoughts or different thoughts coming in and bringing awareness to it. And like, why am I even thinking this? Like, where did this even come from? And so that's usually because there's actually like a mental field that we're all connected through. And so majority of the thoughts that we think or that come through our mental body aren't even ours. They're just passing through. So I like to tell people not to believe what they think, because it's quite often not theirs and it's not true. So not to get attached to that, because that can really create different mindsets. And I'm really into a growth mindset here at the Vitalist Project, to really moving towards growth and towards empowerment and taking responsibility for the self. So bring awareness to the mental body in that way. Then we have our emotional body, and that is where all of our emotions flow through. And if they don't flow through, they get stuck, then they start to come down even further and land in the physical body. And those can cause all kinds of different issues and stagnations that can then build up into dysbiotic organisms and tumors, cancers, all kinds of different things can happen with that. And then we also have our etheric body, which is a really subtle layer in the etheric field, where we begin to connect from there to, that's more beginning to get into more soul level dimension and having access to our guides and our spirit team. And from there, then we have like the highest levels of our souls in which we have access to, that connects all the way to source energy, like whatever you want to call that, God, the universe, creator, the source of all energy. Everything is energy. So it's a kind of an esoteric anatomy of the body there for you.
That's great. So when you mentioned growth mindset and having people just not believe the thoughts because they're not yours, it sounds simple, right? But for a lot of people that might be challenging. So is there, and before you were talking about how self-talk in itself was important for you, are there other tools, strategies, anything that you help people with where they can actually start to change that inner critic that we all have?
Yes, one of the other things that we do here at the Vitalist Project is we run the Alpha Biotic Training Academy, and we're also practitioners. So I want to share a little bit about Alpha Biotics, which is a hands-on technique that is sending a signal into the brain to reboot it out of a stress state. So, and this is important because what happens when we get locked into a stress state, and that the brain will lateralize and move backwards into the hindbrain. And when that's happening, we're very much so in our like mammalian reptilian level of brain function versus like a human level of function, which would be in the forebrain. And when we're there, it's like these predator prey games. And that leads us into being usually into a victim mindset, where it's like me against them, someone, the world, the circumstances, this person, whoever, whatever. It's like they're out to get me. They're the perpetrator or the villain, and I am the victim. And in that place, then there's also usually a hero, and this is called the victim triangle. And when we're in victim mindset, that is like there's no responsibility taken really for the self. Everything becomes outer reactive, and it's like we want someone to save us because someone else hurt us or did this thing to us, or a circumstance or whatever. And so basically we found that there's two brain modes. There's a growth and repair mode, and then there's our survival mode. Survival mode is protection mode. That's what we know as a fight or flight. As humans, we wouldn't have made it this far if we didn't have both modes. But what has happened in today's society is that we get inappropriately stuck in survival mode. We're not designed to be in that mode for very long. And so when we get stuck in there, that is when, like I said, we lateralize to one side of the brain. And what lateralization is, hemisphere lateralization, is where one side of the brain begins to have a brownout. And then the other side is where all the energy is moving towards, usually away from what we're perceiving as a stress or a threat. So we're designed for something called simple stress, which is a stressor that has a very clear beginning and a clear ending. For example, I like to go back to primitive times because this is what we're adapted for, where we are picking berries down by a river, and all of a sudden there is an alligator like coming out of the river. So we immediately, what our brain does on its own, will send the energy away from the threat, away from where the alligator is coming, to then power up the opposite side of the body, which is the one that may be about to be attacked, because this hemisphere, the right hemisphere, controls the left side of the body. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. So then that gets into protection mode and starts moving all of the blood out of the midline and into the peripheries to get ready to fight or flight. The brain moves into limbic system function, like survival becomes key. The brain doesn't care about digesting the berries we were just eating if we're under threat. So digestion, everything, all systems kind of go on the back burner, and survival, getting out of there or fighting this, becomes the most important thing. So let's say we do run out of there, and then, the alligator doesn't want to go that far from the river. So it leaves us alone and it goes back. It's a clear ending. It's gone. The brain sees that. It's like, oh, great. We're not in danger anymore. Can come back into a whole brain function, and then balance will be restored back into the body. The blood will come back into the midline, back into the viscera, and get digestion, cell replication, everything else, back on track. But unfortunately, in today's society, we have something called modern complex stress, which are stressors that have many beginnings and no clear ending. This goes from, for example, waking up late to, the alarm didn't go off. We have to get to work. We had an important meeting. Then we can't find our keys. And we finally do. We get to the car, we spill our coffee. Then we get cut off in traffic. And then we get to work and the boss is not happy and it's kind of yelling at us or reprimanding us. And this all just happened in the first 2 hours that we're awake. That is a lot of beginnings and no real clear ending. It's just going to keep happening. We're going to keep having to work. We're going to keep having to drive. There's perpetually this lifestyle of go, 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 go. So, we can't take away the stressors, but what this system is designed to do is help the brain adapt to the stress and release and recover from stress that's been accumulated over years in our body sometimes when we get locked into that chronic stress state. So this is one of the things that we have found, because when getting the brain reboot, basically that's sending this it's all good signal. That's the ending that the brain's been waiting for, that clear ending. And it realizes it's not in imminent danger because it doesn't know the difference between an alligator and traffic or someone cutting you off. They're both going to create the same neurological response of release of the stress hormones and everything else. And so when we send that signal into the brain, it literally resets the entire nervous system, the whole brain. It comes back into whole brain function. The body comes back into balance and begins to repair itself. So this also pushes the brain, the level of awareness into the forebrain, and we have less beta brainwaves happening on one hemisphere, and we begin to have more alpha, theta, delta brainwaves happening equally on both hemispheres. So we're having a more aware, conscious, alert, calm brainwaves happening on both hemispheres while also working in the forebrain. And this allows us to function at a human level of function, which is a place where we can step into a growth mindset and we can begin to take responsibility for ourselves and our lives and be the creators that we are instead of falling into that victimhood. So there's a lot of tools and different things in that, but that's one of the main ways that we have found that we do share with people. We teach practitioners how to do this, as well as have our own center that people can come and get aligned.
I don't know how complex this is. Is this something that you could take us through a mini hands-on exercise here with the alpha biotics?
I can show you how to do something that's almost like a self-alignment, but it's not going to have as great of an impact as if you find an alpha bioticist in your area or near you to experience it yourself. That is definitely like one of the things, like I wish that I could fully align myself to the depth that this does. And there's tons of practices, actually. EDGU, even yoga and meditation, other things can help bring you into that balanced state and the brain into whole brain function. It just takes a long time. And the longer that it takes to get into that state is the least amount of time that it will last. That's what we've found. And so this is a very quick, high sensory input to the brain. And then it lasts quite a while, which is why I've begun to teach it and everything else. And why I love it so much is because nothing is quite as efficient as getting the brain optimized so that the body can do what it does best, which is to heal itself. So one of the things that we found is actually an ancient Egyptian technique where you take the base of your palm towards the thumb and you put it behind your your ear at the base of the skull. So kind of right under the occiput, if you're familiar with your anatomy. If not, that's just the bottom of your skull bone. And you kind of there's a ridge there that you can feel into. And then you just press in gently and swipe up 3 times. So you just you're pressing in and swiping, so you'll feel it on your head, and then you switch to the other side. Same thing, using that same ridge, and 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. And that is a technique to begin to bring yourself into that more balanced state. If you sit for a moment, you might notice, and if you turn your awareness in and close your eyes and just take a deep breath, you might notice some shifts starting to happen from just doing those little bursts, those little swipes in those spots. So it's sending a signal into the brain, giving that all good signal. So ideally, there is some shifts happening with that already, being able to do that for yourself. And like I said, finding someone in your area. We do have a directory, and we're always teaching people, and we're always interested in finding more people that want to do this, to share this with people, because it's so beneficial, and we'd love to have more out there in the world doing this and helping other people come into balance. But that's a little tidbit you can at least do for yourself. And one of the things I like to do for myself, if I can't get an alignment, or even in between alignments, I do that. And then I practice EDGU. And as I said, EDGU makes the hemispheres of the brain talk to each other. So it actually helps restore that balance and maintain that balance. The two go together really, really well.
That's great. I'm very sensitive to those things. So even when I just touch the back, like my occipital bone area, I usually feel a release. So immediately I don't know if you saw, but I yawned a little bit, and works amazing for me whenever I touch the back of my head, my ears. We have all of these points on our face, our ears, our head that we can touch in different ways that will drop us into a parasympathetic state. So thank you for sharing that. And if you're listening on a podcast player, you can go to YouTube if you want the visual. Swirl just showed us how to essentially kind of calm ourselves down really quickly with our hands.
Yeah.
So you're mentioning these other bodies and things. How do we get to these other dimensions? How do we start to access these other states of being? You're talking about like the 4D, and some people can get into the 5D. Is this beneficial for our health, and how do we start to tap into that?
It's a great question. So I believe it is beneficial for our health, because this is the planet that we live on is in its own ascension process that is expanding in the consciousness of the energy of the planet. So it's a little woo-woo, but that's what's going on an energetic level. We are living on a living being, and she has her own consciousness. And as she's moving through photon belts in the universe, in our galaxy, there's more and more light coming in. And as that's happening, these different types of lights, which we are going through a new photon belt, new light, different frequencies of light that we've never experienced before, that this planet has never experienced before, is happening. And that is causing a natural ascension process for the planet as well as for us. And so the best way to begin to tune into that is to bring your awareness internally to presence. I mentioned that everything always comes back to presence. And we can use all of these other modalities to really nail the 3D so that we're healthy and happy and comfortable. All of those 6 different, aspects that I talked about, where we can bring those into balance. And then we look at those through like our sexuality and our spirituality and our mental space and our emotional space and also the physical, getting all of that into balance and bringing that through our awareness internal, and then beginning to keep ourselves grounded and centered with the earth, in tune with the earth, with as well as staying connected to source energy. So there's this vertical line of presence that moves through our body. I mentioned this with our spine. There is an energy like a tube that's called the pranic tube, the jed, the sushumna, depending on what tradition you want to look at. We call it the axis of presence here at Vitalist Project. And so it's this tube that runs vertically through our body from the crown of our head, the very top, all the way down to like kind of the base of the tailbone and our perineum. And that is literally where our energy, all presence, moves through that upwards and around in this donut-like shape, but then also the other way from the earth and up, constantly happening. And this creates a toroidal field, which is what our energy field looks like. This is also where our energy centers run through horizontally through our body. If you've heard about those, they're also called chakras. So having all of this imbalance and this awareness starting from the 3D and bringing it internally, building your resilience and your strength and turning your awareness inward, focusing on the breath, slowing down, being in parasympathetic, all can lead to this journey of basically an expansion that's usually coming from the heart space. So tuning in to the center of you, the most central space, which is the heart space. And there is an expansion that happens. The heart has the greatest magnetic field of the body. And so we are like little magnetic beacons energetically, where we literally are like, if you think of like an antenna, we send out signals into the field. Like I was talking about those thought fields that we can tap into and different things, but we can also send our own signals out, which is one of the things I love about EDGU is that I said, we can load our boat. We can ask for the things that we want. We can create the life that we desire through manifestation. So we send that out, being aligned at like the top of our little antennas, our little beacons. And then our heart is a huge electromagnetic tool, like amazing thing that will then begin to magnetize that which we do want. And so having that awareness and tuning into the heart, having these different practices will begin to allow someone to just open into these other levels or these other dimensions. It's something that will happen very naturally, but a lot of times it takes getting, really nailing those aspects of the 3D and then allowing that natural expansion to happen and the natural ascension to happen. Like I said, it's already happening. There's so many different, what they call like ascension symptoms that people are like, what is this? What's going on? And it's like, there's so many different ones. Like example is like like high pitched tones in the ears. That it's not exactly a ringing, it's not tinnitus. And this is from my own example. When this started happening to me years ago, I actually went to the ear doctor and was like, I think something's majorly wrong. I'm having these sounds, but it wasn't constant. It was just every once in a while, there'd be these high pitched tones, sometimes in this ear, sometimes in this ear. And he said, there's nothing wrong with my hearing. And I don't have tinnitus and everything's fine. So he's like, I don't know what's going on. So I was like, okay. And that actually began to lead me into finding more and more out about ascension and through my spirituality. And I already had a strong spiritual practice through finding my soul's purpose and deepening in self-love and caring for myself and deeply connecting into my soul's essence. So I was already aware of those things, and then begin to say, oh, that's an ascension symptom. This is just a part of expanding in consciousness and growing as a human on an energetic, on a frequency, vibrational level. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Have you listened to, you probably have, the Joe Rogan podcast episode with Terrence Howard by chance?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I loved it. I've begun to listen to it again for a second time. He is awesome. And that rocked my world. I've been sharing it with so many people. I already loved both of them and in their own ways. But then when that came out, I was like, Terrence Howard has really tuned in to some amazing things. And similarly to kind of the things I'm talking about, he just was in tune with these energies of what was going on and was having dreams and different things as a child that led him to having all of these ideas and now these patents that can literally save our atmospheres, help all of humanity. There's so many things. I definitely recommend listening to that one if people have time.
Yeah, well, it reminded me of it as you were saying, we're moving through a photon belt and you can feel it and the ascension's happening anyways. In that episode, he was talking about how because the sun is losing mass, that Earth's weakening and actually drifts away from the sun 6 centimeters per year. And so essentially, I mean, his theory, but it sounds very real, is as we're moving further and further away from the sun, we are changing based upon the changes in the atmosphere, as you're talking about, which is creating this. It's not just it's an evolution, and it's the ascension that's happening. I believe that's part of it, and I just found it fascinating. So I just wanted to share that. If anybody wants to go a bit deeper into that whole topic, they can go listen to that Joe Rogan podcast episode. It's pretty new. Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So I want to maybe give the listeners something a little bit more of how they could tap into that consciousness. So would you say some of the conscious breathing could help with that? Is there a specific conscious breathing pattern or something someone can start doing?
Definitely. So, I'm just reminded now as well that that's what you were asking about, the multidimensional. When I mentioned that was about EDGU being a multidimensional practice. So that's because it is a physical practice, but it's also accessing all of the bodies, the mental body, emotional body, and etheric body all at once. So you're balancing and vibing up your energy field while doing that practice. So that's a great one to really come into presence and really start tuning everything up physically, through your whole being, as well as there are simple breath techniques. So one of the things that I found that with many of my clients is that a lot of people don't actually breathe normally or optimally. And so how to breathe the most efficiently is in through the nose and out through the mouth. So the nose has these little tiny turbines in it that will filter out different things, and it creates a cooling energy, which helps with the parasympathetic. And when you do the inhale, you allow the belly to fill up like a balloon. And then when you exhale, slowly and gently out the mouth, you pull the belly towards the spine. So just having that awareness. And what I have people do is to close their eyes, turn your awareness inwards, and focus on the breath and take a slow, long, deep breath through the nose, filling the belly like a balloon. And then exhale slowly through the mouth, pulling the belly towards the spine. And again. So now that you've got the actual breathing pattern, way of breathing, then we can add a pattern. And one of the ones that we love, we call big wave breathing. So we like to imagine the ocean and these waves coming over us and the breaths as waves. So we do this with we do it in that, like a metaphor of the ocean, because if you ever watch the waves of the ocean, or if you're a surfer, you know that there's little wave, little wave, little wave, little wave. And every like 6th to 7th wave is a big wave. And you can catch that one and ride it if you're a surfer. So we're going to imagine our breaths like that. And we're going to breathe in the fashion that I just showed you. And then we're going to do 5 like regular or little waves. And then on the 6th one, we're going to take a breath in as deep and as full as we can. And then we're going to exhale it completely. And then you do that a few times. Usually what we recommend is doing it like 3 to 6 rounds. And I use my hands to count it so I don't lose track. So we can do 1 round together and just see how that feels. So you'll begin with an exhale, blowing all your air out, and then inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. 1, and again. 2, again. 3, 4, 1 more like that. 5, now a big one all the way in, as deep as you can, and exhale it all the way out. And the idea is to have them be all connected with no pauses in between them. And then I'll keep adding on my second hand. When I get to that 6th one, it becomes 1. And then when I get to the 6th one again, then that becomes 2. And I'll fill my hand, and do it 5 rounds. So that's called big wave breathing. And like I said, it's done very with no pauses in between the inhale and the exhale. Just let those waves go. And through doing that, it brings someone inward, calm, definitely into the parasympathetic, and therefore more aware and more present. And the more present we are of the moment is the more consciousness and awareness that we're able to have, because we're having those balanced brain waves happening of that more alpha and theta brain waves.
I love that. Breathing is so powerful and so easy, so easily accessible. It's free. Anybody can do it. It's so amazing. I'm going to Austin, Texas next week to get my somatic breathwork certification. So I'm so excited for that, because that's been a big part of my healing journey. But I also love these super calming, very simple techniques that you just taught us. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Are you open to doing a quick speed round, and then we'll wrap up? And it's just kind of like fun questions, not necessarily health related at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. It sounds great.
Awesome. So first thing that comes to your head, if you were on a deserted island, what 3 things would you bring with you?
Water would definitely be the first thing. Let's see, first 3 things. So water. If I could have like a Leatherman, like a multifaceted tool, that would be great. And wow. I get 3 things.
You want to bring a person with you?
Yeah, totally. I'll bring my husband.
There you go. What's your favorite hobby?
I was thinking more like objects.
It could be anything.
What was that?
What's your favorite hobby?
You said hobby?
Mm-hmm.
I would say my favorite hobby at the moment is making yummy things in the kitchen.
Love it. What's the best purchase you've made in the last year that cost you under $100?
I would say, in the last year.
Or ever. I'm giving you hard questions today.
Yeah. Under $100. I would say that I'm gonna have to go. What keeps coming up is my Organite piece. So if anyone's familiar with Organite, it's I made like, I guess it's technically considered like a crystal, but it's like a resin-based thing, and it has different metals and gems and different things in it that creates a specific energy field, and it's EMF blocking, and also helps keep things vibed up. And so, I don't have mine on right now, but I often will wear that. I have different frequency devices and fun things like that.
That's great.
That's like I don't go to the airport, like through security and different like big machines, like without that.
That's great. And then last one, if you could leave the listeners with one tip that they can implement this week to help them live a healthier, happier life, what would that be?
Well, I would say that's to go get my free gift that I've created for people, because it's a little calendar tool that I created called the Every Small Step Vital Calendar, because I found that every small step matters. And it's really the small steps that lead us to where we're going. So it's a free calendar tool that I created. It has all the instructions and everything that helps you focus on things that you would love to do to care for yourself. And the more that you do things that you love, the more fulfilled life that you'll have. And it doesn't take that long to fill out. It's a process of scheduling it. And I guide you through all of that as well. So you can go to vitalswirl.com to get that and begin taking the small steps towards your fulfillment.
Awesome. We'll have that in the show notes for everybody. And then any other final words or share where people can find you.
Yeah, people can go to that as well. And then also my website is vitalistproject.com. So that's vitalistproject.com. You can find everything out about us and me there. And yeah, my greatest advice is to just be who you are, be where you are, and enjoy your beingness, and do everything that you can to be you.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Swirl.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, this has been great.